Hello everyone, this is Fear Script. Today, we will share a story about a group of 4 friends who decided to relax quietly in a camp they rented. However, fate had other plans, leaving our heroes a note that read, "The number of people is 9. By the first night, our heroes realized that something was wrong with this number. Whatever was living in the camp had already begun its count. By the time the last bar of service died, the road was barely a road anymore. Pine branches crowded the truck like hands. Gravel popped under the tires. The forest pressed in so tightly that even the sky looked narrower, like it had been stitched shut above the treetops. I was 26, exhausted, and trying to pretend I wasn't. That's what you do when you're the one who planned the trip. We weren't camping, not in the heroic sense. We had reserved a rustic youth camp that rented out its cabins in the off-season. Real bunks, real bathrooms, real fire pit. It was supposed to be easy mode nature, just enough wilderness to make you feel like a different person by Monday. 4 of us rode in: me, my girlfriend Jenna, my best friend Cal, and Cal's little brother Mason, 19 years old and too online to be happy without a signal. The wooden sign at the entrance was old, gray, and scarred with years of weather. Willow Ridge Camp, EST 1978. But someone had scratched lines through the letters. Not just once, over and over, like they'd tried to erase the name by force. Mason leaned forward between the seats. "That's welcoming." Cal laughed, but it came out wrong, more like a throat clearing. The gate stood open, no lock, no chain, no closed for season notice. Just open like it had been waiting. We rolled in, past the entrance. The camp opened into a clearing with several cabins, a dining hall, a rec field, and a skinny dock on a lake that looked black even in daylight. Fog drifted over the water in lazy strips, like smoke that didn't know where to go. There was one other vehicle in the lot, an older, mud-stained SUV. No plates on the front, and the rear plate was crusted with dirt. I couldn't tell what state it was from. "No staff?" Jenna asked. I checked the reservation email again, even though I'd already checked it a dozen times. It said keys would be in the lockbox on cabin 3. Self-check-in. Cal pointed. "There's cabin 3. Cabins were numbered with little metal plaques. I could see them from the road. Cabin 1, cabin 2, cabin 3. Except cabin 3's plaque had been pried loose and put back on crooked, like somebody had tried to steal it and changed their mind. The lockbox was there, and the code worked. Inside were 4 keys and a folded map of the grounds. And a note. The note wasn't on official letterhead. It was just paper, torn clean from a notebook, folded twice like something personal. In blocky handwriting, it said, "Headcount is at 9. Do not miss it." That was it. No welcome. No call if you need anything. Just that. Cal smiled like it was funny. Camp tradition. Jenna took the note from my hand. Her brow tightened. "That's not cute." Mason already had his phone up. No signal. Love that for us. We hauled our stuff inside. The cabin smelled like old wood and dust baked by summers. Bunks lined the walls, and the center room had a long table with a stack of board games that looked untouched. One thing stood out immediately. A clipboard hanging on a hook by the door. On it was a laminated sheet titled, "Cabin 3 Occupant Log." Underneath were rows of names and dates, except the names weren't filled in. Most entries were just blank lines with check marks, and the most recent date, yesterday, had a check mark. I stared at it. "We're the first people here in months," I said, mostly to myself. Cal shrugged. "Maybe someone did maintenance." Jenna walked to the window and pulled back the thin curtain. "Guys," she said. We all moved. In the trees behind the cabin, about 30 yards out, was a ring of small wooden posts, like stakes. Each one had a little rectangle nailed to it like tiny signs. They were facing us, and on each one, in black paint, was a number. 9. "Headcount is at 9, Mason whispered. Cal's smile finally died. I told myself it was an old camp game, some counselor ritual, some tradition where kids spooked each other around the fire. Still, it felt wrong that the note was waiting, like the camp hadn't been abandoned. like it had simply been unsupervised. We spent the afternoon settling in, cutting firewood, dragging picnic benches closer to the pit, trying to take normal pictures where nobody looked nervous. But the woods kept doing that thing where silence is too specific. Birds would call, then stop abruptly, like they'd been signaled. Twice, I caught myself glancing at the tree line behind cabin 3. It wasn't paranoia. It was the unmistakable feeling of being watched without any proof. At dusk, we made burgers on the grill outside the dining hall. The big building was locked, but the grill pit out front was open and stocked with propane, like someone expected us to use it. When we walked back to the cabin, Mason stopped dead. Guys," he pointed at the dirt path. There were footprints, big ones, not ours, fresh, deep, like someone had walked through recently with heavy boots. They led from the woods to our cabin and stopped at the steps. Jenna's voice dropped. "Maybe staff." Cal looked around too fast. "Maybe." I tried the door. It was locked, but the handle was angled slightly down, like someone had tested it and let go. We went inside and bolted it. Then we laughed too loudly about horror movie stereotypes, to prove we were fine, to convince ourselves the camp was just a camp. At around 8:45, we had a small fire going. The lake reflected nothing. The sky turned the color of bruises. Smoke rose straight up in an unnaturally calm column. I looked at my watch. "Headcount at 9, I said. Cal groaned. "You're not actually." The camp bell rang. A single metallic clang from somewhere near the dining hall. Then another. Then a third. Exactly like a dinner bell, but slower, like someone was counting. I stood, firelight crawling across the cabin windows behind me. Jenna grabbed my wrist. "Don't," Mason whispered. "That's not. There's no power to ring a bell. It's a manual bell," Cal said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. Like, "Pull rope," or whatever. The fourth clang came, then the fifth, and I realized something cold and simple. It wasn't coming from the dining hall. It was coming from inside the woods. The sixth clang, then a pause, then the seventh clang closer. "Get inside," Jenna said, not loud, but final. We stomped out the fire as best we could, kicked dirt, threw water, and rushed into cabin 3. The moment we slammed the door shut, the bell rang again. The eighth clang sounded like it was right outside the window. Then silence. We stood there, for people, holding our breath in a cabin that suddenly felt too thin to protect anything. Mason's whisper cracked. "What happens at 9? And right then, something tapped the cabin wall. Not a scratch, not a branch, a deliberate knock. 1, 2, 3, then a pause. Then, like it had been testing our reaction, a fourth knock directly on the door. Cal's voice was barely audible. "Don't open it." The doorknob began to turn. Slowly, the doorknob turned with careful patience. Not frantic, not forced, like whoever was outside had time, like they knew we wouldn't. I stepped in front of Jenna without thinking. Cal grabbed a flashlight off the table. Mason backed up until his shoulders hit a bunk. The knob stopped turning. Silence stretched out. Then the knock returned, soft and polite, like someone requesting entry to a dinner party. Cal mouthed, "Who is it?" I didn't answer out loud, because if I did, I'd be participating. That thought arrived in my head like it belonged there already. "Don't participate." The knocking stopped. We waited. 10 seconds. 20. I leaned close to the door and looked through the narrow gap where would met frame. I couldn't see anything. Not because it was dark, because something blocked the gap from the other side, like an eye pressed close. But it wasn't an eye. It was flat, featureless, a darkness that didn't reflect. I stumbled back. Jenna caught my elbow. "What is it?" I shook my head. I didn't want to give it a name. A minute passed. Then we heard footsteps. Not leaving, circling. Slow, steady steps on the porch boards, careful to make them creak. Like the sound itself was the point. Then the footsteps stopped beneath the window. The curtain shifted just slightly, even though the window was shut. Something exhaled. Not a sigh, not a breath of relief. A calm, controlled breath, like someone smelling food. Mason whispered, "I hate this." Then, without warning, the bell rang again. A single clang, then another, not counting up, counting down. Cal's flashlight beam trembled across the walls. "Why would it count down?" he asked. And that's when the camp's loudspeaker popped alive. Old speakers mounted on poles around the grounds. The kind you use to call kids to meals or announce activities. Crackled with static. Then a voice came through. Not clear, not loud, but unmistakably close. As if the speaker wasn't broadcasting, just pretending to. The voice said, "Cabin 3, missed headcount." Jenna's hand covered her mouth. Cal stared at the ceiling like he expected it to cave in. Mason said, "That's a recording, right?" The speaker crackled again. "Cabin 3 is short." I felt my stomach drop, because short wasn't late. It wasn't absent. It was a measurement. The voice continued, calm as a counselor reading rules. "Headcount is at 9. Camp must remain at 9. Then the speaker clicked off. Silence returned so fast it felt snapped into place. We didn't sleep. We sat in shifts, backs to bunks, flashlight ready, listening to the woods press around us. Every creak of the building sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind sounded like someone standing up. At some point after midnight, the tapping started again. Not on the door, on the window. Soft, rhythmic taps like fingernails, not trying to break in, trying to remind us it was still there. Then it stopped, and something else began. A dragging sound outside. Wood on dirt, something heavy being pulled. Cal finally cracked the curtain by an inch and looked. His face changed immediately. He didn't speak for several seconds. Then he whispered, There's another post." "What?" Jenna whispered. "In the ring, behind the cabin." My throat tightened. "There were 9. Now there's 10, Cal said. Mason's voice went thin. "But how?" Cal turned to us, eyes wide, and said a sentence I'll never forget. "It's fixing the problem." At dawn, pale light seeped into the cabin. The woods looked normal again in the way a liar looks honest when you can finally see them clearly. We decided to leave. No debate. No, maybe it's nothing. No pride. We packed fast, hands shaking, backpacks half-zipped. When I opened the door, cold air hit my face. The porch was empty. No footprints. No sign of anyone. But on the ground, right in front of the steps, was a single pine cone placed upright like a marker. And next to it, another note. "You can leave, but the camp stays at 9. We moved as a group to the truck. And that's when we saw it. The SUV in the lot, the one from yesterday, was still there. But now its doors were open. Both front doors, like someone had climbed out and never bothered to close them. Jenna whispered, "What if someone's hurt?" Cal shook his head hard. No. We go." We got into the truck. I turned the key. Nothing. The engine tried, coughed, then died. Mason said, "No way." I tried again. Nothing. Cal leaned out and popped the hood. Everything looked normal until he pointed. The battery cables were gone. Not cut. Gone. Cleanly removed. As if someone had taken them politely, like borrowing silverware. I stared at the empty clamps and felt a sick kind of awe. This wasn't random. This was controlled. This was a system. Then the camp bell rang again. One clang. Not inside the woods this time. From behind us. From the direction of the ring of posts. We turned. And there, between the trees, stood a figure. Too far to see details, but close enough to know it was watching us. It raised its arms slowly and pointed toward the lake. Then, with the other hand, it pointed back at the cabins. Like it was giving directions. Like it was saying, "Pick one." Mason whispered, "What does it want?" And Jenna answered, voice small, "It wants 9. The figure stepped back into the trees, and as it did, something moved on the lake. A ripple, long and smooth, like a body passing just under the surface. Then, near the dock, something pale broke the water. A shape, human-sized, floating face down, perfectly still. Cal gagged. Jenna grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. Mason made a sound like he couldn't decide between screaming and crying. I couldn't look away, because my brain kept trying to solve it like a puzzle. Then the body turned, slowly, like something beneath it had rolled it over. And the face that surfaced was Mason's face. Same hair, same mouth, same half-open eyes. Except the eyes weren't looking at the sky. They were looking straight at us. And the mouth, full of lake water, formed a silent word. A word we didn't hear. A word we still understood. 9. We ran. Not toward the lake. Not toward the cabins. We ran into the open field like animals fleeing fire, because open space feels safer when you've been trapped. But the open field was the worst place to be, because there were poles there too, speaker poles, light poles, old activity markers, tall, thin things that made you feel watched from above. And the woods circled the field like a fence. Kel yelled, "Back to the cabins!" Jenna screamed, "No!" Mason was hyperventilating. "That was me." "No, it wasn't me." "What was that?" I grabbed him by the hoodie. "Eyes on me. Move." We sprinted for the dining hall because it was the biggest building, and big buildings feel like help even when they're empty. The doors were locked. I slammed my shoulder into them anyway. Pain flared. Then I noticed something. A chain. Not on the doors. On the handles inside the glass, like it had been locked from within. Like someone had locked themselves in. Cal raised the flashlight to the glass, and we saw the inside. The dining hall was filled with tables and chairs, stacked neatly. But at the center of the room was a circle of chairs. 9 chairs. And in each chair, something sat. Not bodies. Not exactly. More like shapes that looked like people from a distance, but wrong up close like mannequins made from cloth and shadow. Each one faced inward, as if they were waiting for the 9th to arrive. The loudspeaker clicked on again. The same calm voice. "Headcount is at 9. Then softer. Cabin 3 is short." The shapes in the chairs all moved at once. Not standing. Not turning. Just a synchronized tilt of their heads. Like birds noticing motion. They tilted toward the glass. Toward us. Jenna stumbled back, choking a sob. Cal grabbed my arm. "We can't stay out here." We bolted to the nearest cabin, Cabin 2. The door was unlocked. That was worse than locked. Inside, it smelled like damp blankets and old sweat. On the wall, the same clipboard, and the same log, except this one had names. Not full names. First names only. Simple. Normal. Like kids at camp. And at the bottom, written in fresher ink than the rest. Mason, Jenna, Kel. A blank line, waiting for my name. My stomach flipped. Mason saw it too and started shaking his head violently. "No, no, no, no." I ripped the clipboard off the wall and threw it into the corner like it could bite. Kel swallowed hard. That's not possible." "None of this is possible," Jenna whispered. Outside, footsteps moved along the cabin wall. Slow, deliberate. The speaker clicked on again, closer now like it was tuned to us. "Camp must remain at 9. Then, a new sound. A second voice. A child's voice. Laughing. Far away. Then closer. Then right outside the cabin. And that laugh. It was Mason's laugh. His exact laugh. Mason clapped his hands over his ears and rocked. "That's me." Jenna backed into a corner, eyes darting. "It's copying us." Kel stared at the door like he expected it to open itself. "Or it's making replacements." Something knocked. 3 taps. Pause. Then a voice, soft and friendly, through the wood. "Hey, let me in." It was my voice. My exact voice. Same cadence. Same tired tone. Same, I'm trying to sound normal voice. Cal's lips parted. "Don't answer." My voice outside said, "Guys, come on. Let me in." Jenna whispered, "Why would it do that?" And then the answer hit me cold and clear, because if we let it in, we're acknowledging it. We're accepting the rules. We're participating. The speaker crackled. "Headcount is at 9. Then my voice outside said something new. Something it shouldn't have known. Something only I'd said in private. A phrase I used to calm Jenna when she got anxious. The voice outside repeated it perfectly. Jenna's face drained white. Her whisper barely formed. It heard us. Cal's voice rose, panicked now. We have to break the rule. How? I snapped. How do you break a rule in a place that's built around it? Silence. Then Mason whispered, add someone. We all looked at him. He was staring at the corner where I'd thrown the clipboard. Camp wants 9, he said. What if we make it 10? Cal shook his head. No, that's... Mason's eyes were wet. It added a post. It made 10 when it thought it needed to fix the problem. So what if we overwhelm it? Jenna hugged herself. By bringing in the SUV guy? We froze. The SUV in the lot. Open doors. Someone who never left. Or couldn't, Cal said. Or the thing in the dining hall. The 9 chairs. My throat tightened. Those aren't people. The loudspeaker clicked on, interrupting us. Cabin 3 is short. The door handle twitched once, like a warning. And then the knocking began. Rapid now, impatient. Not polite anymore. The cabin lights flickered. But there were no lights on. Only our flashlight beam trembling. Mason stood abruptly, voice breaking. I'm not dying here. I'm not. He moved toward the door. Jenna lunged and grabbed him. Mason, stop! But he fought her. Cal grabbed him too. But Mason was stronger than you'd think when panic is driving. He ripped free, yanked the door open, and shouted, What do you want? The woods went silent. The air felt like it got heavier. And the voice outside answered, gentle now, like a teacher explaining something simple. I want the 9th place. Mason froze. Then he turned his head, slowly, like he was being guided by invisible hands. His eyes settled on me, and his mouth moved barely. Sorry, he mouthed. Then he stepped out. The door swung closed behind him. We slammed the deadbolt, but it didn't matter, because Mason didn't run. He walked. Cal and I threw ourselves at the window and watched him go. He walked toward the dining hall, toward the circle of chairs, toward the 9th place. And as he crossed the field, the camp bell rang. Once, then twice, then 3 times, like applause. We didn't go after Mason right away, not because we didn't want to, because our bodies wouldn't move. There's a kind of fear that turns you into furniture. Jenna slid down the wall and cried into her hands. Cal paced like a trapped dog. I stood at the window watching the dining hall. Mason reached the doors. He stopped. He looked back once. And even from that distance, I could see his face wasn't his anymore. Not in expression, in emptiness. Then he disappeared inside. The moment he did, the loudspeaker came on. Headcount complete. And the entire camp exhaled. Not literally, but the wind shifted through the pines as if the forest itself had relaxed. Cal whispered, We have to get him. Jenna shook her head frantically. No, he's gone. He's not gone, Cal snapped, voice cracking. He's in there. I forced my legs to work. Okay, I said. We do this smart. There was a maintenance shed near the rec field. I remembered seeing it on the map. If anyone would have spare battery cables or tools, it would be there. We ran, quick, low, scanning the trees. The woods watched. We felt it. But the camp felt quieter now, like it was satisfied. The shed was unlocked. Inside were dusty bins of supplies, a wall of tools, and a rack of old camp gear. And hanging from a nail like someone had left them intentionally, a pair of jumper cables. Brand new, still in plastic. Cal stared at them, breathless. That's convenient. Or planned, Jenna whispered. We grabbed them anyway. When we returned to the truck, my hands shook so badly I could barely attach them to the battery clamps. Cal helped. The engine turned over immediately, like it had never been sabotaged. Like the camp had simply been holding us until it got what it wanted. Jenna climbed into the passenger seat, pale and silent. Cal hesitated by the driver's side. He looked at the dining hall. I can't leave him, he said. I met his eyes. Cal, that's my brother. I swallowed. If we go in there, we might be the replacement. We might be the 9th place. Cal's jaw tightened. He nodded once, like he heard me, but didn't accept it. He stepped away from the truck and started walking toward the dining hall. Jenna screamed, "Cal!" He didn't stop. I chased him, not because I agreed, because I couldn't let him go alone. We reached the dining hall doors. Up close, the glass was smeared, as if many hands had pressed against it from the inside. Cal grabbed the handle. It opened. No resistance. Inside, the air was colder. The smell hit me first. Lake water, old cloth, something metallic like pennies. The circle of chairs was still there. 9 chairs, 9 shapes. But now one chair wasn't a shape. It was Mason, sitting upright, hands on knees, staring straight ahead. His eyes looked too shiny, like they were glass. Cal rushed forward. "Mason!" Mason didn't move. Cal grabbed his shoulder. Mason's head turned slowly, mechanically, until he looked at Cal. Then he smiled, and the smile was wrong. Not because it was evil, because it wasn't his. It was the kind of smile you make when you're pretending you're human. Mason spoke, voice flat. "Headcount is at 9. Cal swallowed hard. "Mason, come on. We're leaving." Mason's eyes flicked to me. Then he said softly, "Cabin 3 is short." The shapes in the other chairs all turned their heads at once. And then, from behind us, the doors slammed shut. The sound echoed through the dining hall like a gavel. The loudspeaker inside the building crackled, because yes, there was one here too. The counselor voice, calm as ever. "Welcome to Willow Ridge." Then, quieter. "Please state your name." I felt my mouth go dry. Cal's breathing turned ragged. Mason's smile widened, just a little, and I understood the trap. It didn't need to chase us. It didn't need claws or teeth. It only needed participation. The camp wasn't hunting bodies. It was collecting identities, names. A head count isn't a number. A head count is a list. Cal whispered, "Don't say it." The speaker repeated, patient, "Please state your name." Jenna pounded on the dining hall door from outside, screaming. We could hear her muffled through the glass like she was underwater. Cal grabbed my sleeve and leaned close to my ear. "If it gets one of us," he whispered. "It keeps 9. I shook my head. "No." Cal's eyes were wet. "You drive." And then he did something I still replay in my nightmares. He stepped forward, into the circle, toward the empty chair, the 9th place. Mason's gaze followed him with a hungry calm. Cal turned to me one last time, and he mouthed, "Don't participate." Then Cal sat down. The moment he did, the room warmed by a fraction, like a furnace had clicked on. The shapes stopped moving. The speaker crackled once more. "Head count, complete." The doors unlocked with a soft click. I ran out into daylight like someone fleeing a burning building. Jenna was there, face streaked with tears. "Where's Cal?" she screamed. I didn't answer, because if I spoke, I would be naming the thing that happened. And I wasn't sure, still not sure, if names were safe. We got in the truck and drove. The camp road looked different going out. Longer, wronger, like it was trying to confuse us. But the GPS came back to life once we hit the highway. And the signal returned like nothing ever happened. We didn't call anyone. We didn't report it. How do you report a place that eats people by counting them? For weeks after, Jenna couldn't sleep unless the TV was on. I started counting without meaning to. Steps to the kitchen, breaths before sleep, people in a room. 9 always felt, right, comfortable. And that's the scariest part. Because one night, months later, I woke up and heard a sound outside my apartment door. A soft sliding sound, like paper pushed underneath. I stared at it for a long time before I moved. My hands shook as I picked it up. A folded note, blocky handwriting. 3 words. Head count is at 9. I looked down the hallway. No one there. But at the far end, by the stairwell, the exit sign flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. Like a bell. And in the faint reflection of the glass doors, I saw something behind me. A shape that wasn't quite my shadow. Standing close, counting.